You know the dairy people up on the top of the town? Moppies. Well, they had cows in this field here. And where the gate is, there, by the side of my house, there was an opening, and he used to bring the cows out through there and march them all the way up the town to milk at the farm at the top of the town. Moppies, that's right.
Many years ago, there seemed to be 2 or 3 small farms in Welshpool. You know, they Foldham Farm, but I think they must have rented land. Well, Morgan's is the milk, rented these fields here, and each day the cattle, well, they used to be driven up to Mount Street to be milked, night and morning. And Mr. Arthur Morgan, that was one of the sons, it was his job to do it. And I well remember the cattle coming. You imagine the cattle coming through the town.
Plenty of room in the 3 bedrooms, a bathroom, separate toilet, so there wasn't anything that we really wanted. It was very nice.
We used to call it the concrete jungle at one time.
Confidence. It's all about confidence.
So it's the 10th on the Thursday, 20th on the Sunday, 22nd on the Tuesday.
Oldford, which was, to say the least, out of character with Montgomeryshire.
This is the only surviving fragment of the old Oldford.
This is where I used to live, and it was called 1 Plas Cyfeiliwr.
Lisa.
10th. 20th.
It is June 2002, and the residents of Oldford are celebrating the Queen's Jubilee with a street party in Square Halwan. Oldford Estate lies at the edge of Welshpool. Built on land originally owned by the Earl of Powys, it looks out across the valley of the Severn. People will tell you that Oldford has always had a strong sense of community.
Stephen and Nicole!
Many of those here today regularly give their time to voluntary activities, and more people are being drawn into that process. There is an expanding range of projects that will build up the life of the community. The older residents can look back to the open fields that were here for centuries before the first houses were built in 1957. The younger children will remember only today's homes. But the history of Oldford as an estate is a complex one, and it reflects huge changes in ideas about architecture and social policy.
I was brought up on the Oldford Estate, which is a small estate of the time in the 50s, dates me, of 70 houses. All of which now in the main have been privatised. and in 1967 the new estate was built. There was a very, very big splash about opening them, and they were very exciting.
The new flats marched boldly across the hillside. The theory was that new ways of building and new ways of living would be required for the coming modern age. Decisions, though, were often driven not by theory so much as by urgent practical demands.
They were bringing people into Flowform, Carpenter and Patterson's and Abercarriers. Those were the three big firms employing many hundred people, all of which that have gone now 20 years later. And the housing was with the job.
The council were asked to provide key worker housing and were a bit panicked about the timescales and decided that they needed something which could be built quite quickly.
Oldford, it was a monstrosity in a nice rural market town.
209 flats, masonettes and houses were built by Bison wall frame, a company that seemed to have an impressive record of constructing homes quickly and cheaply. Factory-made concrete panels were delivered to the site, craned into position, and then bolted together, to the delight of the watching children.
Incredibly interesting. I mean, that we were allowed to play up there. When I think of health and safety features these days, I mean, we were actually allowed on the building site and spent many a time in these buildings, and so we were part of them.
But in fairness to the Welshpool Council, there was an urgent need for houses to let because of industrial development at the time, and reinforced concrete buildings were popular at the time.
Yes, this is, as far as I'm aware, the only surviving fragment of the old Oldford, which was the last piece of concrete I managed to save from the demolition crews before they took it all away. But this is essentially what it was all about. This is what they were built of.
But many people who lived in the Bison flats have some fond memories of them.
I lived in one of the Bison flats, but I didn't have an awful lot of bad things to say about them because they were really nice to live in.
Inside they were beautiful.
Beautiful, lovely and roomy. Obviously they were built to Parker Morris standards, so we're quite big. Unfortunately, the space standards we have now are a lot less than that.
Very spacious inside and lots of cupboard space.
Well, I was so relieved to actually get somewhere for myself and my children to live, to actually get a place of my own. It was, great relief.
I would have stayed there if they were staying up. It was a very nice house.
Once you got inside, you could make them very nice. But once you walked out the door, then it was different.
They were very nice inside. The outlook from the outside wasn't very nice, but the inside were very, very good.
They reminded you of a prison. Everybody reckoned like it looked like a jail.
They didn't look very nice from outside to look at. They used to call it the concrete jungle at one time.
They had the sort of the square thing in the ceiling and hot air gas. And when you got it on 20, it was like a greenhouse, so hot and it couldn't breathe.
The hot air central heating, which was absolutely horrendous.
It was like a corn dryer. It was a blower, wasn't it? And you were either very hot, and it soon got cold, like.
Turn it on just under to cool off. It went freezing, so the heating system was terrible.
Some of them did have a lot of trouble with damp.
Because they were concrete wall frame, the houses just didn't breathe at all, and you really did have to keep your windows open upstairs all the time.
I think at the time the council advertised for proposals. There must have been between 20 and 30 flats empty, and Oldford had a reputation.
Before I even got it, I'd adjusted to the fact that I would be allocated a place in Oldford. You just hoped that it would be in one of the better blocks and not in some of the ones that did really have bad reputations.
They put it on HTV and they showed us an outline of what our places were going to look like. But they showed the top end where there was a burnt out car and, it looked really bad and dirty and filthy. And I think they mentioned people living in squalor. Well, this end of Oldford we were not living in squalor, and I'm sure there were some people up there that were very tidy, not living in squalor, but they didn't show our
that's
end.
right.
In just 21 years, the Bison wall frame buildings had deteriorated to a point where they were no longer viable. No recompense could be sought from the Bison company. It no longer existed. To make matters more complicated, local government reorganisation meant that the responsibility for Oldford was now with Montgomeryshire District Council rather than Welshpool Town Council.
And of course, you know, after transference, reorganisation of local government, we inherited a lot of houses throughout Montgomeryshire, some delightful little village complexes, and amongst all these houses we inherited Oldford.
It wasn't something you could really just tinker around at the edges. It still wouldn't have given you play areas for your children. There would have still been flights of stairs. There would have still been lots of the same issues there, no matter what they did.
The steel reinforcements started corroding and disintegrated the concrete. Well, repairing them was going to cost a colossal amount of money.
So Montgomeryshire District Council needed to find an architect or developer with a vision to successfully redesign Oldford. In the event, the team chosen were already aware of Oldford before they saw the council's advert in the paper.
I was always struck really by how odd it was. I mean, it was the kind of housing I guess you'd expect to see on the fringes in a big industrial city. That was one of the things that I think made me notice the advert when the council advertised for people to come up with ideas for redeveloping the estate.
The council also knew that, including demolition costs and any temporary accommodation needed by tenants, this was all going to cost nearly £7 million.
After the late 80s, housing associations were in a position to borrow. They weren't getting 100% grant anymore, and they were expected effectively to finance their building partly through a mortgage.
The council had to look for a new partner in the form of a housing association. By itself, the council was not going to be able to raise this amount of money. But changes in the regulations set out by local government now meant that a housing association could raise some money through a rent-supported loan.
Housing associations, I mean, they could borrow in the private sector, if you like, and the local authority wasn't allowed to.
Not long after I'd been living here, the council called a public meeting. They were talking about proposals to A, leave it alone, I think B, to knock it down completely and rebuild, and the other option was to do some sort of tarting up of the estate. You know, they sort of generally asked at the end of it, which option do you think was best? And just the whole meeting said, knock it down. Knock it down. Knock it down.
But before it could be knocked down, many complex interlocking procedures had to be gone through. A housing association had to come on board, and T Cymru and the Welsh office, both putting substantial funds into the project, had to reach agreement on all the technical issues. At every stage, the people of Oldford had to be consulted, for it was they who were facing the uncertainty and upheaval whilst getting on with their normal lives.
Well, there was a community living in Oldford, wasn't there?
Absolutely, yes.
And you had this little school there. You could see the children's work on the walls.
Yes, yeah.
It always reminded you you're dealing with a community, you're dealing with people.
When I took over in 1978, took over half a school. There was one teaching area, one hall, and two mobile classrooms, which I think were probably the poorest in the county, or the country even. You know, they were a nightmare.
I was obviously the first parent to speak to Miss Evans.
On my first morning, she tapped the staff room door and apologised because she was wearing her slippers. Because she had to go to the doctor, she'd got swollen feet and she thought she'd caught for another baby. First conversation.
Well, we started our first playgroup, didn't we, for the parents.
You were the tea lady,
Tea lady.
toddlers, weren't you?
Yeah.
Thursday afternoons.
Yeah.
Cheese biscuits and a good mug of tea, wasn't it?
A leaking kettle. And I got fed up with this leaking kettle, so we'd done a collection with parents and we called Miss Evans into the room to give her. She started crying.
Because a cup of tea was close to my heart, you see, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But we had school trips and
everything.
Visits and
Then we
parents groups and concerts. We did parents concerts.
Oh, do you remember?
What part were you?
And Georgie Porgy, you were Mrs Macaroni.
I was Mrs Macaroni with 14 children, and I had to dance into the hall with 14 children following me singing, I am Mrs Macaroni, very fat and not so bony. We'd had a grand campaign to try and get the school built, to try and get it finished. Parents were good at agitating. I was good at censoring their letters. We had lots of people come round, county councillors and whatnot, and we worked very hard, and we were inspected by Marianne Parry, who was a known expert on infant education, and we received a National Curriculum Award, for which we went to the Barbican. Went for tea to the House of Commons. You came with us, didn't you? As well. Also while I was there, got the MBE. It's not mine, it's ours. Yeah. That's why I put this on today. And I came back and wore my medal the whole of the next day at school. And it was pancake day. And I tossed pancakes with every child in the school wearing my medal, so I've got the most fingered MBE medal of anyone.
They then held another meeting where they asked for people who would be interested in joining what they called a consultative committee to discuss proposals.
It wasn't just about the buildings, but it was about the people that lived there.
This must have been after 1988, because we just had the 1988 Housing Act, which then made it possible for them to transfer stock or even part of it to a different organisation.
The different organisation, after one false start, proved to be Clwyd Alyn Housing Association.
I think Clwyd Alyn at the time were very keen to expand anyway, and they saw it as I think at the time, as a foothold in Mid Wales. In fact, still the only voluntary stock transfer that happened in Wales. And they were adventurous, and I think you needed somebody like that. Because it was a big project and it wasn't for the faint-hearted.
There were some who thought the whole task too daunting and proposed delay.
I was reminded of a speech by William Pitt. I'd learnt in school in my history. Roll up the map of Europe. We will not need them for 100 years. And I said, in answer to the proposition, roll up the map, the plans of Oldford. Yes, the local boys in this part of the constituency probably see me doing too much in Welshpool, started calling me Lord Oldford.
There were to be two crucial elements in the new Oldford. It was to be a case of voluntary transfer. The scheme could only go ahead if a majority of the tenants voted for the ownership of the estate to pass to Clwyd Alyn. This vote was a legal requirement, overseen by the Electoral Reform Society. Secondly, Michael Goulden and Catriona Graham were determined to ask residents what they wanted in their new homes and, within the budget available, to try and get it for them.
We tried very hard really to give people as big a say in the whole process as we could.
There was a lot of tenant consultation all the way through. People more or less got what they asked for. I think whether it's what they wanted in the end, it remains to be seen, but it's what they asked for.
I think gardens were a very exciting prospect for most people, really.
And swimming pools?
Swimming pools were mentioned, which unfortunately we couldn't provide.
They had previous visits and heard of previous proposals. They thought, oh, here we go again, some other bright idea.
It created some budget problems at times. We had to find money to pay for these, and there was some challenging that. We didn't start with strong preconceptions about how the houses themselves would emerge. I think other than came out of this process of listening and talking to people, and the extent to which we managed to get a bit more variety and a bit more interest in the scheme, I think was probably because we put a lot of time in planning and thinking about that.
We are lucky in the development in the sense that there were individual blocks, but once we were able to start with one block, then transfer, it became work like a domino.
One of the benefits of actually having everybody involved, was that we really gained a lot from their knowledge of the estate, and in fact it was one of the people living there who I think gave us a clue which unlocked the first move, which was one of the critical things, how we actually got the show on the road to begin with, got the first block built and created some space then to start demolishing.
This consultation process was to trigger a whole new era of community awareness.
So I went along with a friend just to go and see what the colours were like, to choose our colours, and she ended up putting me forward for a committee member, and I've been on the committee ever since.
A lot of them went on to do further training, which shows the importance of starting off in a small way and getting people's enthusiasm and giving them confidence. It's all about confidence and building up people so that they think, I can do it, nothing's beyond me.
1995 I decided to just do something with my life and started off with a parenting course and family literacy course in Oldford School.
During the years I was with the Tenants Association, I was always on the committee, did various things.
And did an access course, and from there I went back to college then. I've done level 2 and level 3 in play work.
We were invited everywhere to speak to people because it was the only one that had happened in Wales.
I did some evening classes and got my Clwyd 1.
And I can remember the Welsh office phoning up asking me if I'd go on to a working party as a housing association member.
From there I went back to college then. I've done level 2 and level 3 in play work.
And I suddenly thought, this is ridiculous, I'm spending more time on housing matters than I was on anything else.
I did an introduction to counselling and social work.
And really it's about time somebody started paying me to do this.
From there I went to Newtown College and did a year and got my certificate in counselling.
Because I was trying to bring up 2 children by myself as well.
I don't know where I'll go from my teaching course.
And even though I had no professional experience, so I applied, and I think I was very fortunate.
I'd like to run support groups and courses on the estate and in the community, and like self-help groups and help people to help themselves really.
And I was lucky enough to get the job.
They have helped themselves to get educated, and I think that's what impressed me more than anything.
And because of my experience in the Housing Association and working in a local authority, I actually got a first-class honours degree in housing management.
And because they're getting educated, or Morag of course has been, they've instilled this same enthusiasm into the young people in Oldford.
Pick the best spree here. It's a suitable time for you. And a vote, which is the one to go with, right? So I'm going to pick 10 o'clock, 12 and 2 o'clock. I'm going up for 10 a.m. Ah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 12 o'clock. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 o'clock. 1, 2. So it's 10 o'clock here, a.m. in the morning.
But still, people are still there. They don't get up till about 1.
They managed to get to this meeting, didn't they?
They've set up a youth committee, and I think that is a tremendous advance. I'm not sure whether it's the only one in the country that has a youth committee for a tenants association.
11.
The old paternalistic ethos of the Bison era, we provide, you accept, has been replaced by a growing ethos of cooperation and consultation, where residents are taking responsibilities for their own corner of the world.
Can I just come in there a minute, Dee? Yeah. Bring a drink with you, obviously, but there'd be no going into a shop, buy anything, because you're just going to keep on going straight back up to the office. Okay?
So it's the 10th on the Thursday, 20th on the Sunday, 22nd on the Tuesday, and 6th on the Sunday. Those are the dates we could do it. Naomi, best
6.
6. Disa.
10th. 20th of May. Dean, I might not be able to do it. No, she might not be able to do it either.
Yeah.
Every
You
Sunday,
can't please
one
everybody,
view.
you've got to go with the majority, Dean, yeah?
So it has to be the 20th, which is Sunday, or the 6th. So we'll vote for the 20th, which is on Sunday, which it is, yeah. 10. So it is the 20th of that Sunday. Try to come.
I do come back practically every weekend and stay with my daughter. And I just feel very proud that she's living in much better conditions than I was living in similar circumstances when I had her when she was a child.
I've learnt a lot from the school that I never learnt when I was in school. And it helps me out, and I just love doing it.
I think one of the really rewarding things for us really though, is to be involved with somewhere for such a long period. I mean, it has its downside as well, but to actually see things realised and lived in and occupied has been quite a rare privilege these days, where increasingly things are done very remotely and very quickly.
There's so much more going on of the right type of things with a community spirit than there certainly was when I first came to live on Oldford.
First phase of the play area, which is the small children's play area. If you could let us know as soon as possible, as we need to know how much to ask for. The estimated cost of the project is approximately £33,000. Hope you can assist us on this matter.
Wouldn't it be better if you got the kids to start helping to build it? Let them do it.
Yeah, that's what Brendan's intending to do a week on Sunday. They've got a skip coming up here, and they've got 24 pair of gloves, did you say?
I still like it.
Those were the days, good times.
I wish I could actually go back.
I do. Oh, but you can't turn the clock.
No, you can't turn the clock back.
Look for the good in what's today, isn't it?
Among those appearing in this film were Olive Davidson, resident; Anne White, resident; Rebecca Claffey, resident; Yvonne Jones, head of Oldford School; Michael Goulden, architect, and his wife and partner in the design of the new Oldford, Catriona Graham, now Powys County Council Chief Housing Officer; Morag Bailey, former resident and housing manager, Chester Housing Trust; Tom and Joan Jones, residents and warden at Oldford; Sylvia Evans, MBE, former head of Oldford School; Maggie Hurst, resident and support worker at Oldford School; Dr. Bithig Owen, chair of Clwyd Alyn Housing Association; Liz Gannon, resident and chair of Oldford Tenants Association; David Wynne Jones, poet, farmer and former chair of Montgomeryshire District Council.